La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
When you're in a space, a physical space of spiritual worship and religious worship and meditation and prayer and contemplation and spiritual service to the other in virtue and selfless virtue, when you're in that physical space, you open a space inside of you, an inner space of the heart, right? And it's this inner space through which we begin to interact with ourselves and understand, or when and we reflect. So there's an intellectual, perceptive, intelligence dimension to the heart, the spiritual intelligence, if we want to call it the spiritual, the clarity that occurs to the spiritual perception that would otherwise be blocked by our everyday to day life, because we just don't find usually enough time and space to open ourselves to and to deepen into these kind of internal spaces, inward spaces, in our souls, where then amazing insights come from even just reading very little, right? So coming back to that particular point of fiqh, right? That that the more we're in a state of contemplation, the active and also passive, where we're just resting in contemplation, keeping the heart open for contemplating in silence, in stillness, the more profound insights come from, you could say, the other side of the veil, more profound insights. One receives sometimes spiritual intuitions, which you can replace the word spiritual with angelic. So spiritual or angelic intuitions or insights come, especially in these contexts, and it's less from the nafs or the ego self or the psyche or from some other entity, and more of a chance of these insights, understandings, special shifts in perception coming from angels and from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, spiritual insights, because the heart has been polished more, it's open, it's living and breathing finally, alhamdulillah, in these spaces, right? So contemplation and the assimilation of insights, well, first of all, the awakening or the arrival of insights, then their assimilation, right? Whether it's insight spiritually, personally, or from reading, any book, like, a book on saintly or spiritual themes, or a hagiography, whatever it is that you're reading, sometimes those insights can be much more transformative, that or some kind of text on Islamic metaphysics or something like that. And I want to, before I forget, internally an angel's knocking on my door. It's like, don't forget to say poetry. So I heard it 3 times while I was speaking. So spiritual poetry, a very beautiful thing to do, to reflect on it. Rumi's poetry or any other Sufi's poetry, in the context of a spiritual retreat, just to reflect, because the meanings that come are quite special, because the poet themselves, or I should say the Sufi themselves, was inspired by a state and then wrote very beautifully, right? So if you are in certain states of the heart, then you will receive those insights and others that the state wishes to, the spiritual state of the heart wishes to communicate by the beauty of poetry. There should be, I would recommend that if you have a love for the Quran, then two particular things. So I recommend that you contemplate certain themes within the Quran, and you contemplate them, you learn them, some of the lessons from the translations. And there's certain books out there that organize even the Quranic content into themes. Like, there's scholars who have done this in the tradition, and their works are being translated now. The But then also to have a vid of the recitation. So there's something powerful in the sacred vibration and the resonance and the sound of the divine speech. right? So very important to understand. I would say that there's something special to the recitation, something magical beyond magical, um, divinely theurgic, if I want to use precise terms, in just listening with faith, maybe even to without faith, to the Quran. There's something occurs to the body and to the mind and the soul and the heart and the soul, that so to have a regular routine of even one page, a few lines, a few verses, one whole page, if you can, maybe a hizb, one fourth to one half of a part of the Quran, a juz, or sabara, as one may say in Urdu, um, and um, and then if you can work up to it slowly, this would be a beautiful matter. To when reciting the Quran more and more becomes easy on the tongue. That we try to recite a certain amount, perhaps one juz, one part, or almost a part. If you can, such that inshallah you may be able to then complete a recitation of the Quran in 1 month. In every month, isn't that an amazing matter if one could actually do that? May Allah accept that of all of us. If that's not possible, that's perfectly okay to recite, if you can, a page, is a beautiful matter, a day. And to have some kind of wird of it which you recite, because um, there's a spiritual alchemy to just recitation because of the divine energy of the sound. The sound of God's speech is light, turns into light, transforms us into, light. It enlightens our body by the sacred vibration, right? Even if we cannot recite it, then to listen to it, which of course there's many recitations that are much more beautiful than ours and much more penetrating and much more just majestic and profound. And to make this a habit, every day. For the Quran is for all of these reasons. It is a healing as well on the level of recitation. The sacred vibrations heal the body and the mind and the soul, and they ward off evil and evil thoughts, psychic entities, jinn. So there's so many beautiful matters that the divine speech, with which, as you participate in this speech, in your human speech, in the recitation, which one could say is like the sacrament of Islam. It's the recitation of the Quran. You attract angels. And if you're attracting angels, then what you're warding off is the opposite, right? In terms of the dark energies and, like, the darknesses. So this is a beautiful matter to be aware of this. In this sense, this is a good segue into what I wanted to say about the DhikrulLah, the practice of the invocation of God's name or his names or certain sacred formulas found in the Quran and the Sunnah, in the hadiths of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that one, as a definition of the dhikrullah, dhikr means to mention, as we've said. It also means to reflect, and it means to recollect, and it also means to be present with the one remembered. So it has all these kind of meanings, and one can see them as stages for the dhikrullah, for the practice of the dhikrullah. If one deeply practices the dhikrullah, you will begin to penetrate or deepen yourself into these layers of outward mention, repetition of the formula as a kind of mantra, right? Or as a kind of japa, right? Into, or a kind of nembutsu, right? These are sacred terms that one can use to understand one modality or one element of the dhikrullah, right? Of the dhikr in Sufi practice, in Islamic spiritual practice. You can go from that and deepen into recollecting the meanings of what you are reciting, of what you are invoking. And even further than that, you can be present in your heart, longing for the one you are remembering, and then eventually having presence with the one in your spiritual heart, the one being remembered, the beyond all these other things that you're doing at the same time. That is the amazing process of the dhikrullah as a practice. And this, wallahi, this can be tasted, especially in itikaf, especially when you have dedicated space and time and your energies to the practice, which is a very important matter, right? So this cannot be stressed enough, and I wanted to bring up this particular practice, the dhikrullah, as I had not defined it, but there's a divine energy like the dhikr of the Quran, the dhikrullah, its practice, its repetitive practice as a routine has a divine energy that comes upon the soul and the outer being of the dhakir, of the one who invokes. And that cannot and should never be underestimated. And it's one of the beautiful kind of spiritual practices of Islam, that we are not just relying on self-awareness and self-power, if we call it this, but actually, the other power, right? Sometimes the Buddhists call this tariki and jariki, right? But we're relying in a sense on both, but surrendering to the other power, to that which comes from behind the veil as a self disclosure of the divine for revelation. And this is one of the asrar, or the secrets of the dhikrullah. It's profound spiritual blessings that enter our being, which are accompanied by angels that help to transform the dhakir and to purify them, of themselves and of their to resistances, to a more penetrating and permanent awareness of God. Right? And so this element of the dhikr is very important, but it will lead then from an outer dhikr to an inner one that awakens due to a contemplation of the meanings of what is being invoked. And this is very important also until we become more fully present with the presence of the one remembered, right? As Ibn Arabi says, Hudur al-madhkur. The dhikrullah is to have hudur ma'al madhkur, to have a presence with the one remembered, the one who is being remembered. And so this becomes the ultimate realization of the dhikrullah, to awaken to an inner dhikr that is the presence of the divine in one's heart. This is the goal of the dhikrullah. And so that is its own internal dhikr. You can stop external outward dhikr, and you can be continuing in this inner dhikr if one has performed enough of the dhikrullah over the years, right? And so then, especially when you're in states of itikaf, where you go from active aloud invocation to even restful laying down in silence, something is still reverberating, resonating in you as the dhikrullah, as the dhikr, right? And that is the inner dhikr that has been awakened. And then you can sense it more, you can stay with it more, especially in silence, right? Contemplating that pole, that pillar of spiritual realization that is silence or stillness. You can be still and relaxed. And this sense of stillness brings you to a continual internal dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These things are only possible by prolonged states of the deepening, kind of what you could say vertically, inwardly, and sustaining these practices over a period of time horizontally. You really need both of them. And the spiritual retreat is the most optimum means for this possibility, and for this realization. Of course, I want to emphasize also in this context that it is important to have the permission and the protection and the blessings of your sheikh, your spiritual teacher, to perform such things. One should not just try to engage in a 10-day or 1 week, even 5-day or a few days spiritual retreat, even 1 day spiritual retreat, without some kind of permission and instructions from your spiritual teacher. So that because it's really like you're running a marathon, like, but you didn't even, like you haven't really in practice, like you everyone knows how to run. You're like, yeah, I can do this. I'm a Muslim. I'm told by, I'm told by God to remember Allah in outwardly and inwardly, like, in secret, which also is a meaning of isolation. Kind of, it's a beautiful meaning. تضرعا وخفية, that verse, to remember God, with a kind of a tadarru would be, what's a good yeah, so like humility, a kind of awe, like a sense of awe, and a humility and awe of God, a reverential humility. Is what, this is what tadarruk can actually mean. We have the word in Urdu, dargah, like, it might come from the same root, you never know, not sure. But which is more on the, on the element of fear, but this tadarru is this reverential, devotional awe and fear, right? Or humility. And then, and in silence, right? And kind of alone. There's other verses that point, kind of to this, and some say that this is only possible to be realized in sincerity in spiritual retreat, right? That this verse cannot really be fully realized except in spiritual retreat. So these are, so again, the permission is important. And then instructions from your teacher who has done this and can help you with their prayers, to help you in regards to all of this. Of course, one can set a time out for reflection every day. This does not have to be a whole day, just like an hour a day. We waste a lot of time, a lot of hours on social media, etc. And that is a haphazard barrage of videos or to what have you that comes that you did not even want to see. Like, you did not plan on seeing them. You're just interested. You had the impulse, I want to entertain myself. That was the impulse. And then lo and behold, an hour has gone by, and you've gone from one video, kind of on the war to something else, right? Like, some kind of anime thing, and then you're back into something else, right? I'm just saying that, like, the algorithms know you so well, they'll just be able to keep your attention. But all of this, as they're scrolling in, it's as if you're making a choice. It's the illusion of a choice, but they've figured out your preferences. So the intent or the movement forward is always impulse, even if it's something interesting. This is in contrast to contemplation, active contemplation, when you choose a particular book you want to read, a particular topic spiritually, and you contemplate it very deeply rather than riding on the surface the whole time. You stay still and present and go deep. You deep dive into yourself, right? Into a mine of meaning, right? And this cannot be understated, the importance of this. Yes, we're doing okay. So then we come back to contemplation, but as even a furthering of the realization of the DhikrulLah. So all of that is important. And I was intending to go back to these, like to speak about these practices a little bit more. So I hope that that's helpful. One thing to say about your practice of the DhikrulLah here, it really integrates in its own way. It complements or is reinforced by a natural, spontaneous, deepened, and relaxed contemplation of the four pillars, right? In its own way, the DhikrulLah interacts with all of the pillars. To be mentioned that the divine energy that wakes you up spiritually in some way. It is an energy from the divine, even if you do not feel it. Something's occurring. This helps to procure your wakefulness. Some of the dhakirin who do a lot of dhikrullah, there's many stories of this, that they feel an internal heat, sometimes kind of arise in them, right? A heat of the jadba, but also it is a result of this energy, right? And it's sometimes from this that prolonged dhikrullah in a vigorous way can keep you very energetic. Right? There's stories of awliya and dhakirin who were able to stay up all night invoking, or invoke for a portion of a significant, strong portion of the night, and were able to work the next day to without sleeping much or sleeping an hour. Not saying that is the goal, not at all, but it is an effect of the divine energies that come in from the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one cannot overstate this, right? That its power. So you see how it complements or makes you more aware of the inner pole of or the inner pillar of wakefulness, because this is a divine wakefulness that occurs during the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so forth. So you can be in a state of contemplative stillness in your heart and yourself and do the dhikr of Allah. This has some other effect, right? Sometimes we're in a contemplative state and we're more still and we're invoking, we're reciting a wird. Right? Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin abdika wa rasulika nabiyil ummi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. Although I'm slightly moving, I am in stillness. The heart is participating in the pillar of stillness. And from this, the dhikrullah is being recited. And it's as if I'm rotating around the stillness. Sometimes we use the dhikrullah to gather ourselves and to become still. Sometimes we have evoked a state of stillness and we're performing the dhikrullah. So all of these things are various forms of interactions and relationships with the dhikrullah, and they have their own effects, right? On the dhikrullah. So the other day I mentioned silence and whispering your wird. This has a specific, powerful, amazing effect on the heart and your awareness of staying at the heart while interacting with other things. Sometimes you can take a walk and perform a long, wird, and you're whispering it and you're connecting with the silence as you're moving. It's like an embodied, presence in practice in a state of dhikr. What kind of effect does that have on you? That's subhanAllah, that's amazing. But if you have not cultivated enough stillness and silence as you move, then the effectiveness, your receptivity in your heart may not be as profound, although it'll still have an effect on you, right? Cannot underestimate how these pillars interact, and even hunger is a kind of yearning we're hungry for God, hunger for the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the alchemy of emotion and desire, seeking, and yearning, if we've contemplated that pillar of spirituality, if we've tasted it in terms of hunger, we can be invoking from there, right? Like you understand the contemplative orientations that support the sincerity, the deepening of the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Very important. So you see that we already mentioned wakefulness. So and the dhikr itself can isolate you, can bring you into stillness, as suggested. So all four pillars most profoundly are amazing contemplative supports for the dhikrullah. So I hope that this makes sense how these pillars are like this kind of contemplative state that we can enter and engage with a particular spiritual practice, and especially the dhikrullah really integrates all of them, works with all of them, interrelates with all of them, is complemented by them, is reinforced by them. Right? In terms of and I think I wrote a note here for myself that it's very important to stress the complementarity and the reinforcing nature of these practices, right? Even just these practices I've mentioned, not just the pillars, but the practices, the Muhasabah, Muraqabah, Fiqr, Dhikr, right? Self-observation, meditation, contemplation, invocation, right? The more you invoke, the more you become sensitive to the divine presence or an energy awakens in you. If you've been doing other practices, you can be in a relaxed yet subtle state of muhasabah, of observation in regards to when after the practice you come out of that state. That's a natural muhasabah that's occurring. You see how they're interrelating. The more you're aware of that, the more you may learn that like a knowledge of yourself to be able to bring yourself back. Like, oh, I'm out. Okay, I see a pattern here. Why I came out. Maybe I need to work on that, so I can maintain internally a state of the dhikrullah, or at least feeling its effects, or what have you. Right. This is the muhasabah complementing your dhikrullah. Right. The more you do muraqabah, you deepen in the presence of the name that you have invoked into your heart. It comes into your heart. So there's a complementarity between the dhikr and muraqabah. In fact, the more of a state of muraqabah that you're in with your dhikr, the more sincere and more present that you are with it, and the more effect it has, the more transformative effect it has. So I hope you see the reinforcing nature there. Let's see. This is a very important point. The Quran pairs the dhikr and fiqr in various verses. We have the well-known verses that speak about um, uh, to remember God. Like we had heard a sermon by Sidi Haidar, and he had mentioned one of the verses, but there's another verse that says something similar, but the one he used was that after your prayer, after you've completed the prayer, to remember God standing, sitting, and lying down. In the sense that the DhikrulLah, although the essence of the prayer continues in other forms. And then the suggestion he made, mashallah, was that actually in itikaf, we're actually realizing that we prayed and now we return to a form of the dhikrullah. Sometimes standing, sometimes sitting, sometimes lying down. How do we remember it? How are we in a state of remembrance or practicing the remembrance, the dhikrullah when lying down? When you're resting, your prior the dhikr is still reverberating in you. So you're in a state of dhikr. Very much like when you're fasting and you lay down and you fall asleep, you are still in a state of fasting. And there's hadiths, about that blessed is the sleep of the one who is in the state of fasting. Right. So there's hadiths like this. Their breath is a glorification of God. Like that's part of that hadith. So just simply being in the state of the fast, even what would be either something very neutral or negative, becomes a mode of worship, a mode of the fast, a mode of blessing. Likewise, if you're in a state of fasting, you're in spiritual retreat, you're performing invocations, you become tired in your body and you lay down, you are still in a state of dhikr. After you pray, remember God standing, sitting, and lying down, right? And eventually outside of itikaf, this can become a state of being, where even in your restfulness, you are remembering God. And I'm going to remind me to come back to restfulness, or like in the state of rest, and how this must not be underestimated in your itikaf. That actually in the context of resting in itikaf, because itikaf is again not about just doing things to accomplish, but to deepen into these things so that even when you're resting, something in you, even in your relaxed state, is somehow vibrating, pulsing with the remembrance of God. This is a beautiful matter. Yes, Sidi?
So, you made a distinction between perpetual dhikr and permanent dhikr. And so does that correspond to the second and third journeys? Like perpetual is like there's a solid amount of effort that's required to keep it going.
So perpetual and permanent, yeah. Rather than getting into the second and the third journeys right now, because I have not really mentioned it on these kind of, on these talks. So So at some point I may, but I can, to respond with the example I just gave you now. If you lay down and you still feel God's presence, or you're in a state of to remembrance, that's like a perpetual the dhikr. That's a continuing dhikr from your outer dhikr. So that's like a state, even temporary, of perpetual. That's it's perpetuating in you. Because if this is the case, it is due to the fact that the dhikr of Allah, your practice by the grace of Allah, has deepened in you, such that your being is remembering it, is bringing it forth, is evoking it. Very analogous, but this is more profound, but very analogous to when we're very sad and it dominates our state, like that emotion. You can sit down, you can lay down, you're still sad. You're doing the dhikr of sadness. That's a perpetual dhikr. It's a continued dhikr, right? Right? So from this point of view, how pathetic we are that we can do that easily, but we can't be in a state of perpetual dhikr or more permanent awareness of God. Even in states of laying down, as if we fooled ourselves that we had to be like this. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha, or something like that. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha, right? We had to be always like this. Like that's one posture of the practice of the DhikrulLah. You can be completely lying down flat, eyes shut, and be thankful of the state of rest. And that's dhikr. Right? It's just so don't fool yourself, right? Like so my only point is that it's very silly. It's actually very funny when you look at it, that we have been in a state of perpetual resentment to the dhikr. So the dhikr of resentment, the dhikr of anger, the dhikr of sadness, the dhikr of worry, the dhikr of lust, right? The dhikr of envy, right? People are jealous for years, and that is their motivating factor to do things, or how they interact with somebody. That's a kind of dhikr, right? I'd like don't understand this. So to be able to reverse, not even to reverse this, but to bring the dhikrullah into ourselves, is to integrate the sense of an awareness of God with the divine energies and the feelings and the thoughts that come with this. And even simply, subhanallah, I mean, just being aware of God. Thank you. I'm so thankful for this existence. That's a state of dhikr. And that usually will last more if you just even make an intention that I'm just going to stay awake in a relaxed way and grateful for everything, even everything that arises or that happens in my day, to whatever it is, like a fight or a family problem or a personal issue, to whatever it is, or something nice that happens. And all of this, no matter what it is, I'm experiencing it. God's allowing me to exist and experiencing it and experience it. I will therefore be grateful for the opportunity of living and of life. All of this. How does that's first of all, that's a dhikr. You're opening your heart to just being grateful, having shukr of all these things, and you can imagine how this transforms how you are relating to anything that happens, because these are happenings, right? Rather than so you can just see, no matter how bad it appears, if that has been instilled in you, you are receiving that experience from there, from the gratitude of just being given a chance at life. Subhanallah. Right? When we understand that, then this may make those problems kind of less intense and more easier for you to relate to or to work on them. Right now, exchange this for the states we're normally in. When we're really upset for the rest of the day, what does this do to our thoughts and our feelings and how we interact with people? It colors them, right? Like sometimes we might even say to like our spouse or like a partner, like, don't talk to me. I'm just not in the mood. Just stop. That posturing, they came and they didn't want to talk. You're like, because you're upset, right? Just take a look at that, right? Like that has influenced something independent, totally unrelated to your internal state.
Mm,
And you've been kind of co-opted by it.
mm,
And that is your dhikr. And you're just like, look, I don't want to talk to you. I mean, so with all due respect, I'm not putting down anyone or anything like that here or on the, online or myself. We need sometimes our space. Not, I'm not judging that. I'm showing you that emotional state, how much it colors your interactions.
mm,
So imagine the emotional, let's not even emotional, spiritual state of shukr,
mm.
how that would color or express itself in interactions. All of that is staying in a perpetual dhikr, coming back to, this is my point, coming back to perpetual
So
dhikr.
you can be in a perpetual state of dhikr, or just like you can be in a perpetual state of sadness, but you cannot be in a permanent state of sadness. Would that be accurate to say?
Yes, I would say that as a human being, you can be in a perpetual state of of anything, but not necessarily a permanent state,
Except for the DhikrulLah.
except for that, because God is permanent,
Mm,
right? So it can become a perpetual or permanent state in you. And just ask yourself, how many people hold on to anxiety, to anxiousness, to anger, to sadness for their whole lives? Like this is how they live. You see it on people's faces. Their personalities are, shifted to you can almost say, I can see, like as a physician and these sort of things also, both, outward and inward, I can see like the postures inside, not imposter, the postures inside that people have been holding unconsciously and consciously.
mm,
It just shows on your face, right? This is, among the subtleties, right? Just by looking at you all, I can see things.
mm,
But I'm more interested in looking at myself and seeing things.
mm.
But because of the light of the dhikrullah, by this light, it is made to be able to see things, right? This is how these things work. By the condition of your anger, or suspicion, you see everything in suspicion,
Mm,
right? This is what you project then. But if you're seeing with God,
mm.
you're listening with God, you're looking with God, right? Then what will you see? Okay, right? My state is what? The four major Islamic figures were asked, right, by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his beautiful Sufi story.
Mm,
Ya Abu Bakr, what is your state? I see God. What is your state when you see a thing? And this is kind of a beautiful expression or example of contemplation,
mm,
right? A state of contemplative witnessing or contemplation. What do you see when you see a thing? So, Abu Bakr, he responded that I see God before I see the thing.
mm,
All right. And the Prophet ﷺ, he was pleased with that. That was the state of the perpetual of the dhikr in him, that before he saw any object and registered it kind of as an object or as a person or as a rock or a chair or anything, or even a thought inside, he saw God first.
mm,
He contemplated God's presence first.
mm,
He was seeing with the inner eye. He saw God first and then the object. Then, Umar was asked, and he said that I see God in the object,
mm.
or yeah. And then Sayyidina Uthman, he was asked. So all these are very pleasing to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
With an
Oh, so I see that I see God with the object.
That's it, Rahman, right?
That maybe, well, I'm not sure. I'm partly just making the story up too, as I go to capture your attention. But everything I'm saying, there's a truth in it. So you can say that I see God in the object. As I see the object, I see God
Mm,
in the object or with the object. You can say either or if you want to be more technical. Then the next Khalifa was asked, how do you, when you see an object, how do you see it? And then he said, radiallahu anh, that I see the object and then I see God after the object.
mm,
right? And this was very pleasing unto unto the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because that's an important matter also. I mean, does God stop, after we see an object? No. So to see God after the object comes and goes in your perception, that is an amazing matter also. Now, of course, all of this leads to the ever-present presence of God when this is occurring, but this is very interesting when it's occurring, right? So then finally, Sayyidina Ali was asked, and his response is the most comprehensive. Like you might have already, imagined what the response is, right? So when he was asked, he said that as I am seeing an object, I see God to before the object, in the object, and after the object. Right? This is comprehensive witnessing, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he was most pleased with this response, but pleased with all of them. This kind of witnessing, this kind of fiqr is only possible. This state of fiqr that goes beyond cognitive contemplation into spiritual witnessing, and from fiqr to mushahada, is only possible for the ulul albab, right? Like the possessors of the inner kernels of their being. This is, by the way, a phrase from the Quran. There's amazing Sufi commentaries on this verses. You can find them in Dr. William Chittick and the various places he's written about this. If you're interested really in esoteric or spiritual Sufi commentaries or insights into verses, then works like The Sufi Path of Knowledge by William Chittick and or works by Sachiko Murata, his wife, whom I know personally, who are amazing souls, friends of God, right? Who are in a perpetual state of contemplation of God, in terms of assimilating such the ma'arif and knowledges that they teach, that they have researched, read in the original languages, and learned under scholars for years, and now write in English and have been for God knows 50 plus years, right? May Allah preserve them, for benefit. I mean, their writings are, if you see, because they're speaking of Ibn Arabi, every other line has a verse of Quran or a phrase that comes from it, and so he's evaluating or not really evaluating, but interpreting it and making you understand it from a Sufi lens, from the lens of a spiritual state of perception, right? So that's important. So like my point here is that the degree of these four khulafa and their witnessing of an object and their remembrance of God in it, or their contemplating, is directly related to the amount of the DhikrulLah that they did in their lives. They were always in a state of dhikr. That this is the only way it's possible. So the verse, I'm coming back to what I was originally saying, that verse that Sidi Haidar had mentioned in the khutbah. Another verse very similar speaks of those who remember God standing, sitting, and lying down. And then the verse goes on. Can you say the Arabic? And they then begin to يتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض. And they begin to come into a state of fiqr, and they contemplate the creation of the heavens and the earth. And one can say that their inner state says, or they say out loud, but their inner state in their contemplation verifies that verily all of this could not have been made in vain.
ما خلقت هذا
ما
باطلا.
خلقت هذا باطلا. That subhanAllah, this could not have been made in vain. It's because why? Because it's precisely for the same reason why the four khalafa, how they saw objects. It's not made in vain, because these are signs of God, and I see God to before them, in them, and after them. So that this is not made in vain. It's not random. It's not spontaneous. It's not dead, inert kind of matter. It's not dead. It's alive with the presence of God and his signs, as the signs of God. This is only possible when you've deepened yourself and opened yourself into a state of the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is only possible when you are present with the one you have remembered and invoked for such a long time, that this then influences or colors your perception. I'm doing this because all of this is from God. So it's not coloring, it's exactly expressing as it is. That
Mm.
you're now finally, your filters are off and the lens is more polished and the mirror is clean and now it's reflecting things as they are. And you're seeing God everywhere. In Fiqr, in a state of Fiqr, and seeing that nothing is in vain and everything is presence, inward and outward. So you see that the result of perpetual dhikr, embodied, standing, sitting, and lying down in this verse, leads to a state of Fiqr. That really is what the Sufis call the Muhasabah, that they see in the heavens and the earth nothing but God's reality and presence. And they verify that, subhanAllah, this could not have been made in vain. This is all from Allah. This is all somehow reflecting Him, expressing His signs. And you naturally contemplate this. So not just the heavens and the earth, but everything in between, according to another verse that speaks of everything in between. Everything in between is you and your life as well. So everything unfolding in your life is a sign of Allah. The resistances, the challenges, the bad states, the sad states, all of this is somehow an expression of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, somehow a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so if you stay in this state of, you could call passive now, kind of witnessing, not really passive at all, you're in a state of dhikr. So you're in a state of perpetual or more perpetual, more permanent modes of the DhikrulLah. Now, do you understand why it would also take perhaps either 10 years straight of doing very serious, sincere DhikrulLah at multiple times in your day, really putting in the work, right? And deep diving in yourself, La ilaha illallah, just really putting it in there. And hopefully both, prolonged states of spiritual retreat, where you really open the space of your heart and you go super deep inside of yourself by the tawfiq of Allah, right? This is important to understand. This is, and so you see again the reinforcing of all these practices that become alive in your context of the itikaf, right? So let me turn to two things and then make a point here. So I also want you to never underestimate the relaxing and resting in the space of itikaf. We're like in the home stretch now, mashallah. You guys are, we've done a whole week or more. There's 8, 9, 10, right? In terms of nights, right? We're in the 28th night, and we have the 29th, 30th, whatever it is, right?
It's 2 or 3 more days.
Yes, 2 to 3 more nights or days, right? And so we're in the home stretch, right? So you have been here for a while. The points, first of all, congratulations and Mubarak, that you haven't like ran away with sohbah with me and stuff for lessons. Yeah, there is still time. So I have faith in myself that I will be able to make you all run away. But the point is, congratulations also, because you're also now quite fatigued, especially for those who have been here entirely the whole time, right? There's some fatigue, but even those who come in and out, there's a fatigue, right? And they've been coming every day. There's a fatigue. The joints feel it, the body feels it. You have to struggle against that and get yourself back up and continue the practices, then take more breaks. You might have noticed you might be resting a little bit, kind of more, because you're catching up on sleep. We all have broken sleep. Sometimes it's 4 hours, 5 hours. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. Sometimes in a nice night, I think the other night I had a little bit more than that. I was like, this is great, right? But then you will notice you get more sleep, you feel more tired. So then so then you try to bring a balance. But it's not even about that. It's just the body is fatigued. The soul is fatigued. The nafs is really, contracted and is just not liking it. I mean, it now is just, it's given up a bit on making you not do this. Because like, all right, you're kind of here, you've been here for a while, just gonna have to ride this one out. I'll take care of you later, buddy. Like when you're out of here, you're done, buddy. I'm going to get wild. Like, these things can happen, right? But this kind of sense of fatigue and weakness is also the pillar of hunger that it evokes. This sense of kind of meekness, weakness, humility, existential humbleness occurs. We become humbled by this process, and it shows us something about being a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that in our existential ontological state as a servant, we are nothing. So we can't even sit and remember God for 10 days. We're nothing, right? Like meaning like outwardly, perpetually, right? Right. Although of course the point is to open the heart and to be in a space of remembrance internally as the heart is opened. Bismillah, say that, yes.
Point which
Yeah.
was interesting because we had a conversation today about this topic, that the feeling of time was completely changed here. We had the feeling that we spent like 1 or 2 months.
Yes, so like that you were here for so long. So it's widened. So the perception of time, say the Anisa brought up the widening of time, right? Say the Anisa Vanessa Mariam. I like that. See that? So we got it all, right? This experience that time expands. Now I'm going to assume what you mean is that it's surprising it feels that long. It's expanded, and there isn't like there's not a boredom about it. It's like it just feels like that so much has occurred, and it's like what might have been spiritually occurring over a period of a month, but it's only been a week. So in this positive expansion of time, right? Sometimes when you're a child or not, and you're really bored, right? And it feels like forever, right? That feeling feels like forever, right? It's interesting. So even this statement feels like forever, right? One of the problems of hell is, and I've heard this, that Jahannam is also related as a term to like perpetual living, perpetual worldly living. So feeling like forever is like a hellish state, actually. Right? I'm so bored. When is this going to end? I feel like forever. That's ultimate to resistance of the present moment. Just not being in the moment. Like I just can't stand this. When will this end? Right? Feels like forever. Right? That feeling like forever is not what we mean by perpetual in the positive sense. Right? And yes, in the negative sense of feeling to forever. But this feels like a fulfilling eternity. So experience in this time space, it feels like an expanded situation of 1 month, but it's actually only been 7 days or something like that, on to 8, right? So this is an amazing matter. And this expansion of an awareness or experience rather of time and space is due to of time is due to the expansion of the heart. So when people are actually in their hearts, which we are forced not to be when we're in like our contemporary lives, like no matter how spiritual you're in the modern context, you're doing this and that, you're living really in contraction, not in in an expanded and relaxed state of the heart. So the expansion of the heart is not heavy. It's like this really light, relaxed sense. And so an hour can feel like eternity, and that's not feeling like forever. That's feeling fulfilled. Right? This is paradise. This is the paradisial states, right? And that's why something like this, evokes even in the outward tiredness of the energies, right? Which wax and wane, kind of wane, especially with the fast. So we did some qigong exercises and tai chi exercises that actually, and some other exercise that you probably noticed some more energy came into us for today, right? Because we went a little bit more rigorous, right? But that was nice and healthy. And right before the breaking of the fast, it did something to the internal system, more than just presence,
There
it
was
realigned.
wall.
Yes, yes. You might have noticed even your digestion, your digestive energies were strengthened, like how you were eating. Not that you ate more, but that you digested better.
Yeah.
You might have noticed this from, sorry it wasn't recorded, right? Just the way it is from Allah's will, right? But we'll have more opportunities, inshallah, to do that. So in this context, I wanted to mention, but thank you for bringing that up, because that is a beautiful effect of itikaf. Again, I want to stress, it is because you're living in your heart. Physically, outwardly, you're living in the zawiyah, but this zawiyah and this itikaf experience has helped you, has facilitated by the grace of Allah, the expansion of the heart, and actually living from your heart here. That's what's happening. Even the small things, even all the loud noise of the kids when they come at night, we're accommodating all that from our heart. Even if we get annoyed sometimes, we're still in our heart. So we're in our heart. So everything occurring, right? Even sometimes an uneasy, a sense of uneasiness, right, may arise. It's still in your heart. It's because they're just like their energies. Now you're just able to like, you can observe them and you allow them to be. Like, you don't even have to have them leave. Just allow them to be. Like, when you're in your heart, everything will take its proper place. So you can have emotions of hurt and anger, but because you're in your heart, it's all good. So it'll settle where it needs to, or it will leave. Or the door is open, right? Like the famous poem of Rumi. Right? Like that poem of like the guest house. The guest house works when the guest house is the open heart. Okay, when you've sat in the, kind of in that, so they can come in, oh, assalamu alaikum, grief and anger, welcome, assalamu alaikum. They come in, they do their thing, and then they're like, okay, I guess we're not really needed here, because you guys are not all coming to me and I'm not having a good time here, so I'm just going to leave. So it'll affect you a little bit. Or, assalamu alaikum, anxiety. Come on in. You've been a nice old friend for a while. Come on in, have a seat. Ahlan wa sahlan. Right? Right? From the heart, right? And then there's like, wow, okay, I feel kind of lonely. I'm getting anxious. All right, I'm going to leave. No, I'm going to leave, right? Right? And maybe something else might come, right? Lust. Assalamu alaikum, lust. Have a seat, I guess. Maybe you'll convert into the fire of love, right? Or just the coolness of peace. Maybe God will make this fire, like for Abraham, into coolness. All right? And it's like, okay, all right, so maybe it turns into that, or maybe it leaves. Right? So important. So this is a very excellent point that you made. So I wanted to mention two other practices I did not mention, like more specific practices, like I mentioned. So I had a list of like, the ablution, the wudu, how one can experience that in itikaf, be in a contemplative state, which resonates with the four pillars, or at least the pillars of stillness and silence, and so forth. We went down this list, listening to the adhan, the salat, right? We went into that a lot. I wanted to mention the stillness and the silence, especially stillness in movement and in the postures, to really contemplate the postures of the prayer. One can go into the salat al-tasbih, especially in the itikaf experience, and really absorb yourself in each posture. Stay there and just contemplate God, be fully sensing as a means of contemplative support in your khushu, to feel khushu, this submissive awareness or submissive humility and humbleness and relaxed humbleness, this softness and gentleness of your being with God in each posture, right? Khushu, I mean, like my definition would be just be having a presence in your posture, which creates a relaxation, like a relaxed kind of sense, right? In each posture. As Imam Malik, for example, I'm a Hanafi, but I also practice to some extent the Maliki madhab, especially in the Shadili context for prayers. But the one principle I take from the wajibat of their prayer of the Maliki form is something internal, is that in each posture, you cannot move out of a posture unless you have rested your bones in that posture. That's very beautiful. So that's not the case in the other madhabs. Um, uh, so so that's something very beautiful, because if you do that, especially in a contemplative state, you can be more sensitive to, like, for example, after we did the Qigong and then you began praying, you might have felt a lightness of your body, and that you might have felt more present in each posture.
Yeah.
And so if you have that sensitivity from these presence, kind of practices, the Salatul Tasbih becomes one. But the point of it is that it evokes your presence and the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in you, in each posture, so that you're resting your bones in alignment in each posture. And then once you feel that rest, then you can come out of it. And it's prolonged in the Salatul Tasbih itself, each posture, because you're saying more recitations of the Tasbih, you're in each posture longer. So you can taste this, and one should have already by now. I'm hoping that some of you have done at least once. I've done it here, like kind of privately, kind of when I would sneak away, like very few times, kind of at night, right? So something very wonderful about that, and it's a practice I like to practice outside of a tikaf, sometimes in tahajjud time, when I have enough time. I prolong that time, and I really to relax, and I'm nourished by my Lord in the Salatul Tasbih at those moments. So this is a full integration of the body in stillness, as stillness and movement, right? To remember Allah in movement and in stillness. Harakat was sakanat, right? And these words are even used in Arabic in the text of ritual prayer, because there's stillnesses in the prayer and there's movements, right? You come up, now you're still. You have to become still. Part of the movement, if that makes sense, have to be still. So so you're still in a lot of the parts, but then you're moving into the transitions, and then you're still again. So there's movement, stillness, and movements and stillness. So it's remembering God in harakat and sakanat. It's in the sakanat that you can, awaken to meditative presence, right? So get a feel for this in the prayer. So I used to say this. I used to give this advice on the first day. I just didn't, because I assume that some of you would know this from my prior, but I wanted to mention it before, not because I hadn't mentioned it. And so in this context also, I wanted to mention two more. We're at the 1 hour and 15-minute mark. My goodness. All right. Personal prayer, dua, personal supplication. This is an amazing time just to sit in silence after praying, being in a state of stillness and silence, heart opening, and supplicate from a deeper and more profound place in yourself. This is a good time to supplicate and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Very important. So do not, and this can be done privately, and we've done collective prayers together also. They're just very beautiful. They're spontaneous. They come from the evocation of the states that come from these contemplative pillars of spirituality, stillness and silence and hunger and wakefulness, right? And also, finally, which we touched on, relaxing and resting. Do not underestimate the power of relaxing and resting in itikaf. So often in spirituality, subtle shifts of awareness and even openings come in the transitions from active practices to resting and relaxing, in that phase where you're most open, because you've stopped holding on to the practice in concentration, and now you're just in this in-between zone. That's often where the magic happens. This kind of restfulness, being just in a rested and to relaxed and open state, because now your heart can contemplate naturally, inquire naturally, existentially into what this is. What have I experienced? What have I experienced? Who am I? What is this? Well, what am I feeling? To where is God? He's here now. in this practice, but even to beyond it. I felt him there and then in the practice, but where I am now, he's still present. What does that mean? You see how the relaxation of the holding of the DhikrulLah, opens you to a more subtle form of dhikr. That's where the shifts are usually, because a real shift is a combination of a shift of perception of spiritual knowing. That's the most essential element, combined with an emotional, like a spiritual attitude, right? Combined. So the spiritual awareness, the spiritual perception and attitude. When these two combine in the insight, there can be a transformation kind of shift. So do not underestimate this. Alhamdulillah. So with this said, I'm going to end with, because it's an hour and 15 minutes now, they've been going for a little bit longer than an hour. The goal was to keep each of these at 1 hour. My apologies. And I know that we're all tired. You've done half your kind of stretches here on the side. May Allah bless you. You're really struggling outwardly. I'm sorry, bro. I'm sorry. This is really, right? Think you, mashallah, because you're in your heart. I think that you invented a few stretches. It's really impressive. Really impressive. Get the Nafs out of recoil, right? That was really good. All right. Like you see those contortionists, right? Like body contortionists bring their left leg around. All right. Like, where did that come from? Is that even possible? La ilaha illallah. Like, that's a proof of the transcendence of spirit. That can be done. So what animal would try to do that except for a human being? Right. And it's a proof of the spirit, actually. So even when you see a yogi do something amazing and hold their body up or do this, or even calisthenics, that's an expression of the transcendence of human consciousness, of spirit in the body, but in the body and entirely. This is what the yogis are. So mashallah, may you have the fat in your strangeness. Right? In your uniqueness, right? Okay. So I mean, all right. So I wanted to end with at least now, and then I guess we'll go in tomorrow into the inner work, because we've already been talking about the inner work, but I want to specify kind of the centers of human consciousness that you're interacting with in the inner work. So everything I've said also sets the stage for that possibility, and this actually occurs in itikaf if we use the practices more naturally well. Sometimes we're operating from the point of view of intellect, sometimes from the spiritual heart, sometimes even God awakens us to the sir, to our sir, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But putting those terms aside for now, I wanted to mention in this context that you may notice that the same practices that you do, you may be operating from some other level of your self-awareness, right? In the normal outside of the spiritual itikaf context, we might be praying and we're just so distracted by our normal day-to-day that we're stuck in our mind or our body. So the nafsani consciousness, right? This is the first level of kind of practice where we're in a state at best of the mujahada to keep ourselves concentrated, right? In the prayer, we're lost in our thoughts, we come back. You may have noticed here that a lot of those thoughts are kind of gone. Maybe I'm mistaken, but maybe 70% of them, they're not, if you've noticed, they're not as affecting you, right? Except for my wife, who has absolutely no thoughts in prayer, right? Except for her cough. Say that. Say that again. I didn't hear what say. Say that. Come back when the lecture is too long. That's good. That's good. Well, I thought that I was giving you all a longer chance to practice contemplative listening in silence. Apparently, that's not the case. Apparently, I failed. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I will ask for your forgiveness and mine. Right? So you may see that you're operating from one level of your being in a particular practice, but in itikaf, you've just you see that everything is aligned in the prayer, for example, or in your meditation, you're in more deeper states. These could be called the levels of practice, which correspond to the degrees of self-awareness or self-realization, even temporarily, that you are operating from. I outlined 3 degrees of practice that I have, over the years, and that each practice can be practiced. Your religion can be practiced in 3 degrees. We actually have this even in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in some other context, but we have Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. You can be practicing your religion from the station of Islam, from this degree of Islam, where you're emphasizing you're like what's central for you are the activities or the practices. Like I need to pray, so the bodily activity of praying, that's what gets you into remembrance of God, or just that's your relationship with God, your religion with God, that or just the fast, or the act of the fast. See, these are acts of worship as a body. So we're more connected in the practice as a body, rather than a mind that may be contemplating its meanings as you're performing the act, right? That's another level of engagement with the practice, right? And then finally, the third level would be that of presence, or spiritual presence with the one you are worshiping, right? You see how these are 3 levels of engagement with any given, kind of practice, spiritual practice. Whether it's the ritual prayer, whether it's Quran recitation, right? Or whether it's silent Muraqabah. I mean, in your silent Muraqabah, you could be really tight in your legs, your knees, and you're just struggling, but you're still silent and you're in a state of meditation. You're meditating. You may not be in meditation, but you're meditating. Alhamdulillah, that's still good. But you see my point? Meditating is level 1 engagement. The state of meditation is level 2 engagement. The self-knowledge or the self-realization that you were always meditation is 3rd level engagement with the practice, in the degrees corresponding to some degree with the stations of the journeys. But we're putting that to the side, right? But you can taste this. And so you may be there, like they're just, when you go from efforting to effortless meditation, you've gone from 1st level engagement, what I call 1st level engagement, to 2nd level engagement with the practice, right? And when you go even to beyond that effortlessness to a self-knowing that this is what you are, that's 3rd level. And when that shift is definitive, even when you stop the outer practice, you're still in it, right? So whether that's meditation or DhikrulLah, hence perpetual dhikr, right? Dhikran kathiran to dhikran da'iman, right? Look at that, these Arabic words, right? Technical, right? I have your attention now, right? Right? But perpetual or dhikran kathira is a lot of the kind of quantitative amount, an accumulation of a lot of acts of the dhikr. That's beautiful. It's a beautiful state for the soul of the believer to actually be in, that they have acquired lots of dhikr. But and this can lead to, so dhikr and kathira is just like, what's the best translation for this? Dhikr and
Much,
yeah.
abundant.
So abundant is a good word. Abundant, lots of the dhikr as an activity. But the dhikr da'iman is when it's established in you as as a continuous inner dhikr. The ta'alluq, the inner connection with God, is more perpetual, more permanent. And so the DhikrulLah continues in you. This is the transition for the Sufi or the practitioner from dhikran kathira to dhikran da'iman.
So 2nd and 3rd is that.
Yes. You can say, or even going from 1st to now it's become easier to do so much dhikr. Like there's some who are on the first who are trying to do a lot of dhikr and they'll burn out, right? But then when this, by the grace of God, is learned and it's easier, then yes, it's the transition from the second to the third. You may be tasting in the second and the third a little bit, but not the transition, right?
The first, the second.
Yes, yes. So I wanted to bring this up. I've spoken about this, over the years, but it's an important kind of teaching of mine, I guess, astaghfirullah, for lack of a better word. That is a universal teaching, but in the specific context of itikaf, that you may notice that certain practices that you have an affinity for are just, they become second nature, and you're just in it, and it's just you. Right? It's just you, right? You feel this, you feel like you're one with it. So even as states, you can enter, you can engage in third level practice, what I'm calling third level. This is possible for you all. It can be anything, kind of at least when you're sleeping, you're like totally yourself. Right? Just making a joke. But even that, you could be in a state of dhikr in your sleep. And you may not even be aware of it, but you could be. There's something in you that's just simply present as you fall asleep, right? Even contemplating falling asleep. You never go to sleep, as we were talking about, but you fall asleep, right? This was very interesting. You can never, you don't know when you've actually fallen asleep. Maybe there's a karama of like the awliya who are sitting here like, actually, yeah, Sheikh Hassan, I do know exactly when I fall asleep. Exactly. Then I cannot help you. If you're asleep right now, I cannot help you. Right? But the point is, this is an interesting, kind of mystery. Falling into sleep is also analogous to falling into presence. That which is trying to get into a state of presence falls away, and then you're in presence. Just like that mind and body is like, oh, I got to go to sleep. I really got to go to sleep. I have to try to fall asleep. I'm trying to rest. I'm not falling asleep. Oh my God, what's going on? Well, that's what's going on, right? And that will never fall asleep. Right? Like but the illusion. So not only that, but that will, like, the body mind is not what falls asleep. It does turn inward. And then where does it go? It returns to pure consciousness, to pure being, right? And one can argue that actually the process of death is exactly like this. Something of you does die, but you actually awaken in that. There's something you, and Allahu Ta'ala Alam, right? But these are the signs, as the sister of death is sleep. Something in us simply wakes up when we die. So we haven't really died, but something, extrinsically, outwardly has died. Just like something extrinsically, outwardly is sleeping or snoring or whatever it is to other people. But where are you? What happened to you, that one who was desperately trying to go to sleep? The real you doesn't even go to sleep, but you can then argue that the real you doesn't, awaken either.
Never sleep.
This subtle contemplation you can take with you in sleep and in physical wakefulness, right? So in any case, I will end here, inshallah, and we'll pick up on that was a side note. So we'll pick up on these levels of spiritual practice, maybe connecting it to some degree to the stages of the experience of the spiritual to retreat again. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll go into the inner work, and then especially this inner work and what needs to continue of the inner work as we return to the world from retreat. So the next two, tomorrow nights, and maybe the next nights, we'll try to discuss this, inshallah. لا إله إلا الله 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 لا إله إلا الله